Hello everyone! Paisley Parvati Devi here, coming to you today with our weekly yoga philosophy share. I've been doing pre-recorded videos and I've been traveling for the past month and a half or so. I just recently arrived back home to the Midwest, so I've been here for a little over a week now, and I missed being able to talk to you guys and interact with you directly on the live. So for the rest of this series, we will do Facebook Live videos together and finish out this book together, finish out the series, finish out the year. It actually aligns very beautifully and divinely. By the time we finish the book, it will be the end of 2020. So I feel like this has been such a potent practice for me personally, just diving into the philosophy every single week with you guys and reading this book twice over in 1 year. I started, I believe it was in March I began doing these, and we made it through the book once together, and now we're on our second round through and we're actually almost done. So if you're interested in seeing any of the previous videos, after I post this video I will also include a link to the playlist on YouTube where you can see all the previous videos. If you go to my page on Facebook, Livity Yogini, join us on Patreon is what the title of the page is on Facebook. There's also a playlist there that includes all of the previous videos from this series, including the first half of this chapter that we are on today. So today we are continuing the chapter on tapas, or austerity. It is one of the niyamas, the actions to be cultivated in order to attain inner peace. And last week, the video on the first half of this chapter went live, so I do encourage you to go ahead and go back and find that video and watch it. It will probably put the second half of this chapter into a little bit of more context. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what we're reading, ooh, my ring light is bright. It's the Yamas and Niyamas, Exploring Yoga's Ethical Practice by Deborah Adele. And the Yamas and Niyamas are a great starting off point for anyone who's interested in yoga philosophy. They're really foundational to all of yogic thought and yoga philosophy. In fact, it is said that if you can fully embody the first of the yamas, which is ahimsa or nonviolence, then you've effectively embodied all 10 of the yamas and niyamas, and you're basically enlightened. So it's a circular philosophy, meaning that we continue to come back to these concepts again and again, and as we do so, we can deepen our understanding of them. So if you're not new to this, if you have a little bit of yoga background or you've studied yogic philosophy before, then this is also going to be a really great refresher for you, because like I said, every time we come back to these ideas, we can understand them a little bit deeper. And if you have not read this book and you're interested in yoga philosophy, I highly recommend it. If you're one of those people like me who's typically too busy to sit down and read a book, I prefer to listen to audiobooks, and that's actually why I created this series, so that instead of actually you sitting down to read the book, you can just listen to the video and listen to me read it to you. As long as I'm not gabbing the whole time. So let's get started, and I wanted to share a quote from this book that someone in my yoga teacher training class that I'm in right now gifted it to me. I really enjoy this teacher, the Agori Vimalananda. Agora is a very interesting sect of mysticism within yoga, and they tend to use certain things for spiritual practice that we would typically identify as being forbidden. For example, the Agoris are known to hang out in crematory grounds, or the Indian equivalent of graveyards basically, and hang out with all the dead bodies and kind of like attend to the bodies as they're being cremated and so on and so forth. And this instills in them the idea that this life is impermanent, these bodies are impermanent, and it really helps them to create and cultivate an attitude of equanimity and non-attachment to the material realm. So this book has some really awesome illustrations, and I just wanted to share this quote by the Agori Vimalananda. It says, "Fire always burns, and if you worship it properly, it will burn away all your bad karmas. So fire always burns, and if you worship it properly, it will burn away all your bad karmas. And you can kind of see a little depiction here of the guy with all of the representations of death and decay, again, symbolizing the impermanence of this life and these bodies. And the reason I wanted to share that is because tapas translates from Sanskrit as to heat or to burn. And it's said that when we employ austerity in our daily lives, when we employ this idea of discipline in our daily lives, then we can start to burn up our karmas. And we could use a different word if you aren't familiar with karma or aren't comfortable with that word. We could use like an unhealthy pattern, for example. Anything in our lives that we find ourselves continuously falling into or going back to that just really isn't helpful, really doesn't serve us. And so this idea of austerity or tapas is really important to the yogic practice and yogic spirituality, because it's our main tactic that we're using to continuously pull the ego back away from the sense objects. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Some of the sadhus, you'll hear stories about saints in India who are doing these crazy, difficult austerities, but we really don't need to do anything crazy like that. And austerity could be something as simple as, I'm not going to look at my phone until 10 a.m. in the morning, or 7 a.m., whatever time gives you enough time to kind of have your morning routine and morning meditation before you start to look at your phone. That's just one example. So today, like I said, we'll be finishing out this chapter on tapas, and this section is titled Tapas as Staying Power. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is the one that tells of Jacob wrestling with the angel. Jacob had had a bad day. Actually, he had had a string of bad days since he cheated his brother out of the family birthright and had to flee for his life a great distance to find refuge with his uncle Laban. After many years, Jacob returned home with wives, children, and livestock. As he got close to home, he saw his estranged brother with a band of warriors in the distance. This was the brother he had cheated. He figured he knew what was going to happen and it wouldn't be pretty. As things go when we're having a bad day, Jacob's day got worse. He had camped along a stream by himself when a stranger appeared and started fighting with him. You can almost hear Jacob say, "Good grief, what now?" Jacob had no choice but to fight back, and the seemingly even match lasted until daybreak. Imagine Jacob's exhaustion, this on top of everything else. At dawn, the tide quickly turned, and Jacob realized the magnitude of who he was fighting with. It was someone of great power and strength who had merely been toying with Jacob all night. At this realization, instead of recoiling in fear and running for his life, Jacob did something quite amazing. He held on to this being and begged it for a blessing. Knowing full well the power of the being, Jacob held on, and the being who had been wrestling Jacob all night gave Jacob the blessing he sought. Jacob, in that moment, named Israel by the being, was to be a great man, the leader of a great nation, and would impact the world. The biblical text is vague in this passage. At the time, Jacob does not know who he is fighting with, nor do we. Is it a man, an angel, a supernatural being? Is it God or Satan? Without knowing who or what has him in its grip, Jacob holds on until he knows he is blessed by the encounter. So often we don't even know what has us in its grip. It seems dark and overpowering. In these times when we don't know how to get through the next minute of what seems unknown and overwhelming to us, can we, like Jacob, hold on? Can we hold on to what has us in its grip, gripping it back and not letting go until we are somehow blessed by it? Can we grow our ability to stay in the fire and let ourselves be burned until we are blessed by the very thing that is causing us the pain and the suffering? So pausing, thinking about that for a moment. What has you in its grip? What is this underlying feeling? Possibly anxiety or depression. Sure, we can name the feeling, but can we go even deeper and find the cause or the origin of this feeling? And then once we know what the feeling is and where it's coming from, can we sit with that? Can we grow our ability to stay in the fire and let ourselves be burned until we are blessed by the very thing that is causing us pain and suffering? Jacob does not leave this scene with only a blessing. During the wrestling match, the being had touched Jacob's hip, dislocating it. Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. Catharsis does not leave us untouched nor unscarred. We will be bearers of the wound as well as the blessing. St. John of the Cross writes meaningfully about tapas in his treatise called The Dark Night of the Soul. St. John knew the harshness of catharsis when he found himself imprisoned in a monastery, treated with extreme deprivation and abuse by his fellow monks for his more liberal views. In his writings, he uses the example of a log being thrown into a fire to describe the process of being transformed by fire. He says that at first, the log doesn't look like anything. Doesn't look anything like the fire, and if the log has some impurities on the outside, the log will initially stink as it burns. But after a time, the log begins to look more and more like the fire, eventually becoming the fire itself. Like Jacob, St. John of the Cross knew both the blessing and the resulting limp, as the experience left him plagued with ill health for the rest of his life. It also left him in constant communion with the divine. For his dark night of catharsis had picked him up and taken him into the arms of God. This is just reminding me of Ram Dass, for example, who had a stroke. He might have even had 2 strokes, and for the average person, that would be completely devastating and perhaps causing immeasurable pain and suffering for the rest of that person's lives. But for Ram Dass, because he was already very spiritually evolved at the time of his stroke, he actually nicknamed it being stroked by God, and he felt that it brought him even deeper into this state of communion with the divine, and used this horrible thing that had happened to him to actually deepen his internal experience and find more peace within himself. So it's all about perspective, truly, you guys. Tapas is growing our ability to stay in the unknown and the unpleasantness rather than run in fear. It is the willingness to be both burned and blessed. One more time. Tapas is growing our ability to stay in the unknown and the unpleasantness rather than run in fear. It is the willingness to be both burned and blessed. Stay with me, you guys. I know this topic can be a little hard. It's one of the hardest for me to wrap my head around. Our egos really, really do not like discipline. Our egos will fight us every step of the way if we try to impose any limitations on it. But it's well worthwhile, as the great sages and teachers tell us. So tapas as choice is the name of the next section. A friend tells the story about leaving a partnership of 8 years. At the same time, she changed careers and moved to a new town. It was a daunting change for her. She writes, "I didn't start out with the clarity that I ended with. I started out not being able to breathe or eat. Struck with fear, anxiety, and a feeling of being frozen, I needed to find something to help me move through the intensity of my life. My partner had a similar change. He too left the partnership, began a new career, and moved to a new town. He too needed something to find to move through the intensity of this change. I found yoga and created a deep practice and did 200 sit-ups a day, but he chose smoking, drinking, and promiscuous behavior. At the end of that year of our transition, our outcomes were very different. I had this silent strength that felt like it was emanating from my core. He was fragmented, exhausted, and spiraling out of control." The story above is about the choices we make in and out of crisis. If we, like my friend, can choose to strengthen our inner depth rather than medicate and run, we will find ourselves in a land of new possibility. Much like those turbulent teen years, where life has the awesome job of moving us from childhood to adulthood, the promise of a crisis is that it will pick us up and deposit us on the other side of something. Will we trust this process, or will we hide from it? Each moment is an opportunity to make a clear choice of right action. Quite often, the choices that prepare us for the fire are options that vote against immediate satisfaction and pleasure. Again, quite often, the choices that prepare us for the fire are options that vote against immediate satisfaction and pleasure. When we listen to our inner voice and surrender to staying present to the unknown, the unpleasant, and often to the grief and pain, we are preparing ourselves to benefit from and be blessed by tapas. So choosing something that we know is going to be beneficial for us in the long run versus choosing whatever's going to bring us immediate but temporary pleasure in the moment. It's a fine balance, right? This is not saying that we can't ever have pleasure, we can't ever have immediate enjoyment. Of course we can, but if you go back to the videos about non-attachment, then you'll hear a little bit about what having attachment to pleasure will do to us, and that it ultimately does cause suffering. So we're basically preparing for our future selves. We're initiating our future selves with this tapas, this discipline, so that we can have a more vital, prosperous, and ultimately healthy and balanced future at the stake of, what's the word I'm looking for? In exchange for temporary pleasure right now. So what's more worthwhile to you? Do we want to have a sustainable, pleasurable, beautiful, balanced, long, healthy life, or 1 year of like crazy partying and burning out all the time? The discipline of tapas will mold us into someone of great depth and profoundness if we let it. Can we stand the heat of being dismantled and changed forever by the fire? Can we prepare ourselves daily through our practice, our staying in power, and our choices? Can we stay in the burning with integrity? Can we hold on for the blessing? And then at the end of each chapter, she offers a few questions for exploration. So I encourage you to take this week to just reflect on these few assignments that go along with the latter half of this chapter, and then we'll meet again next week for the next chapter. So this week, practice staying 1 minute more in whatever unpleasantness presents itself to you. Can you stand the heat of unpleasantness? Can you let the heat begin to burn away your judgments, opinions, and expectations? So any little annoyance, maybe not something major right away, but just finding something, you know, that typically gets under your nerves. Maybe it's sitting in traffic or something, and, you know, a lot of us get road rage if, you know, people are not driving how we think they should drive. So can you just sit with that discomfort? That's just one example, but whatever is personal to you, can you just sit with that for a moment and hold that within yourself and say, yes, like, I don't like this right now, but ultimately it's not something that I have control over, so I'm just going to sit with the feeling and maybe even transmute that feeling into something like compassion, like, oh, that guy just cut me off, but maybe he's late for work, or maybe his wife's having a baby, I don't know. But we can cultivate, you know, this attitude of compassion, understanding, and tolerance, right? And then the last little reflection is, this week, pay attention to your daily choices. Are you making choices that are indulgent, or making choices that build your strength and character? Listen to your inner voice and make changes that prepare you for the heat of life. That's a good one, y'all. We were discussing tapas. Last weekend I had my YTT 300, my yoga teacher training, advanced yoga teacher training class online, and we were talking about tapas, and it was so funny. Someone was like, I think of tapas as when I have two decisions, I think of which one's gonna be like the short-term indulgence and which one might be a little bit better for the long run, and if I can see that the short-term indulgence is not going to be better for the long run, then I try to make a different choice. Keyword being try, right? Nobody's saying that this is easy. And then one of the other students responded by saying, yeah, I do that too, and I almost always choose the one that's going to be the short-term pleasure. We all had a good laugh over that. It's good to be honest with ourselves, you know? I feel like it's one thing to totally be in denial about the ways that we're hurting ourselves, or, you know, the patterns that we have that just maybe aren't serving us anymore. It's another thing to at least be able to be honest about it and see it, you know, at least acknowledging it is the first step in every scenario, every challenge in our lives. So acknowledging that, seeing that, and we do have a saying in our lineage from our teacher Baba Hari Das, who is of the same lineage as Ram Das, by the way, and he says, the watched thief can't steal. So if you're seeing the imbalance or the challenge, whatever it is, if you're watching it, this pattern, this tendency that you have, you know that it's there, and maybe you still keep on doing it. It could be years of keeping on still doing this thing, but but you're watching it. You see that every single time you do that thing, it never ends up to your benefit. And the longer you realize that, the more deeply then you're like, it becomes easier, right? There's more of a case for yourself to convince yourself not to keep doing that thing, because like for me, I know every single time I eat late at night, I wake up the next morning feeling groggy and not very good, like my food hasn't digested. So even though I still do it sometimes, I'm noticing even more strongly every morning when I wake up, when that happens, oh gosh, my stomach really doesn't feel good, I feel like tired and like blah this morning. And that gives me a good motivation then to not continue to do that in the future. So this is how we cultivate the attitude of self-discipline, and it's definitely a lifelong, ongoing process. Thank you guys for listening. I just want to share with you one more book. It is my original hand-illustrated coloring book, Creatures of the Earth, and I wanted to share this with you because we have Black Friday and Small Business Saturday coming up really soon. I know a lot of you aren't in the US, but here we have Thanksgiving on Thursday, Friday is Black Friday, Saturday is Small Business Saturday, and then we have Christmas coming up, of course. So whether or not you celebrate Christmas, if you would like to give someone a nice gift for the holiday season or for their birthday or just because you love them, or if you want to give yourself a nice gift because you love you, this is my original hand-drawn coloring book available for sale. Please feel free to message me or contact me on any of my platforms if you would like to order your copy. Good morning, Joan. Nice to see you on here. And I'll just open this up so you guys can see. Joan already has her copy. But there's 22 designs in here, and I drew every single one of them myself. And it's been an ongoing process of creating this beautiful project, and I'm very proud of it. And yeah, I would love to share it with you guys. It makes me so happy that my artwork can make other people happy. That's all I have for today, you guys. I love you so much, and I hope to be seeing you next week. Be sure to check out all my platforms. I will leave my link tree in the description box so that you guys can like and follow me places, and I'll be happy to return the favor and spread the love. Let's build our community, and I hope that you have an amazing day. Om. Namaste. Peace.